They told me I wasn't welcome at my own mother's birthday. I stood outside with a gift in hand, humiliated. But I walked in anyway. And when my sister's boyfriend saw me, he stood up and said, "She's my boss." This isn't just a story of revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice even when your family tries to silence it. I never imagined I'd return home just to be turned away at the front door like an uninvited stranger. But there I was, 35 years old, standing outside a lakeside event venue in the town where I grew up, holding a gift wrapped with precision and hope, only to be told I didn't belong. The irony would have been amusing if it hadn't been so heartbreaking. It was the perfect day for a celebration, cloudless skylight breeze carrying the scent of cherry blossoms, sunlight glinting off Lake Monroe. The boathouse had been transformed into a glittering shell of warm lights, polished wood floors, and an orchestra of familiar laughter from people who once called me family. Today was my mother's 60th birthday, a milestone, a crown jewel of gatherings, and I had flown in from Seattle first class just to be part of it. I'd spent weeks planning this visit. The dress was carefully chosen, a navy sheath with clean lines and understated elegance. The heels were silver, soft on the foot, but sharp enough to command presence. I wore a scent I hadn't touched in years, one I remembered my mother complimenting when I was 22 and nervous before my first job interview. And the gift, a vintage emerald brooch nearly identical to the one she'd lost when I was a child, the one she had once called the only piece of grandma's I wish I'd kept better track of. I found it after searching through antique shops and estate sellers for months. Everything was perfect. Everything was intentional. I was ready. Until my father met me at the door. He stood straight as ever, still military in posture even though he retired more than a decade ago. He held a clipboard in one hand, a guest list in the other. "Gemma," he said, as if surprised to see me. "Hi, Dad," I replied, heart leaping with a childish hope that this would be the moment. He smiled, opened his arms, said, "Of course you're here. Of course you're welcome." Instead, he glanced down at the clipboard. His eyes moved, paused, then looked back at me. "You're not on the list." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. "Excuse me, you're not listed as a guest," he repeated, voice clipped. "I can't let you in." I thought it was a joke. My father had a sharp sense of humor, once dry and dark, but it existed. This wasn't that. I stepped forward, slightly lowering my voice. "I spoke to Mom last week. She said she'd love to see me. She was just being polite. You've made it clear you have other priorities." Something inside me began to unravel. Not in a messy, emotional way, but in the quiet, devastating way that comes when reality crashes into the remnants of hope. My grip tightened on the gift box. "Can you at least let her know I'm here? She's busy. We have a schedule to maintain." Behind him, I could see the silhouettes of guests through the windows, some familiar, some blurred by time. Laughter floated out as someone clinked a glass. Then I saw her. Brooke. My younger sister moved like she was hosting the Oscars, wearing a pink chiffon dress almost identical to one of Mom's old favorites, her hair curled just the way Mom liked it. She was radiant and intentional, speaking to guests, holding court like she was the one turning 60. She looked toward the door and locked eyes with me. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look apologetic. She smirked, then turned away. I took a breath. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mix-up. This was exclusion, crafted, rehearsed, executed. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body begging me to scream, to push past, to demand acknowledgement. But I didn't. Instead, I extended the gift. "Please give this to her," I said to my father. My voice was steady. "It's from me. Tell her I hope she has a beautiful birthday." He hesitated, then took it. Like I was handing him a donation or a package wrongly delivered. Without another word, I turned around. My heels tapped against the pavement as I walked back toward the parking lot. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I didn't let the crack inside my chest widen. I held myself together like armor. I walked like I had somewhere better to be. But when I reached the rental car and slid into the driver's seat, my hands trembled. I stared at the dashboard, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. No calls, no texts. Not from Mom, not from Brooke. Just silence. The kind that suffocates. I had flown across the country, rearranged meetings, and rehearsed conversations in my bathroom mirror, all to be treated like a distant cousin trying to sneak into a wedding reception. And still I didn't cry. Because somewhere between the laughter I once knew and the rejection I just faced, I had learned a hard truth. Sometimes you don't get to have a seat at the table, not because you don't deserve one, but because someone decided the narrative without you. I thought of the brooch. Of the way Mom's eyes lit up when she talked about it all those years ago. Would she ever see it? Would she even know I was here, or would Brooke tell her I never came? The ache rose slow and relentless, but I refused to let it spill over. This wasn't the time for breakdowns. This was the moment I chose something else. Dignity, clarity. Silence that screamed louder than any accusation. I started the car. Drove away from the place I once called home. Not out of defeat, but because staying meant pleading for space that should have already been mine. That day, I lost something. But I also reclaimed something greater. I didn't belong behind that door. But maybe I was meant to build a new one that wouldn't need permission to open. I didn't go back to the hotel right away. Instead, I found myself parked outside the elementary school I once attended, staring at the faded playground set behind the chain-link fence. It was mostly empty now, just a couple of kids swinging lazily while a teacher in a windbreaker stood nearby, arms crossed. Funny how places hold echoes. As if they remember who you were even when you're no longer sure yourself. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let the memories rise, uninvited but persistent. Growing up as the middle child in the Walker family had always been complicated. My older sister Danielle was everything a parent could ask for: a straight-A student, a pianist, and captain of the debate team. She spoke with confidence, wore coordinated outfits, and was already applying to Ivy League schools by the time I was learning fractions. My younger brother Caleb was the baby. The accident turned blessing. With his curls and dimples, he had a natural talent for charming people into doing things for him. Even at 5, he could disarm a room with a pout. Everyone adored him. And me, I was the one in between. Not gifted enough to compete with Danielle. Not cute enough to distract like Caleb. I was just there. In family photos, I often appeared at the edge of the frame, sometimes literally half-cropped. During dinners, I spoke and was sometimes spoken over. During holidays, I opened presents quietly while the others unwrapped praise. There was no malicious intent, I don't think. Just the slow erosion of visibility when you're surrounded by stars. Except for Mom. Mom saw me. When I was 7, I didn't get invited to Melissa Bryant's birthday party. Every girl in my second grade class did except me. I'd spent days pretending I didn't care, telling my mom it was just a dumb pool party and that Melissa probably forgot. But I cared. I cared in the way only a child can, with a fierce, aching loneliness that feels like it might split you open. The day of the party, while Danielle was out with friends and Caleb was napping, Mom walked into my room with a bright smile and a stack of construction paper. "We're throwing our own party," she said. I blinked. "What, our own party?" she repeated, sitting on the floor and spreading out glue sticks and scissors. "We're making paper crowns and you get to pick the music. And I bought your favorite strawberry cupcakes." I stared at her, unsure if this was a joke or some strange parental consolation prize, but it wasn't. She meant it. We spent the afternoon making crowns, laughing at how lopsided they were. We danced in the living room to Whitney Houston and Taylor Dayne. We ate cupcakes on the back porch with juice in wine glasses, and she told me, "You're special in your own way, Gemma. Don't ever forget that." She didn't say it to comfort me, she said it like it was fact. That day anchored me. It was the first time I felt seen, not for being remarkable but for simply being myself. Another time, when I was 12, I placed 3rd in the county science fair for my solar system model. It wasn't flashy. Foam balls painted with patience, strung with wire, revolving around a sun made from a yellow stress ball I found in Dad's drawer. Danielle had taken home first place in the same competition 3 years earlier. Her project involved circuitry graphs, a PowerPoint. But when I brought home my 3rd place certificate, my mom beamed like I'd won gold. "This is amazing," she said, holding it with both hands. "You worked so hard on this." She framed it. She actually framed it. hung it right next to Danielle's wall of academic glory. Dad wasn't pleased. "It clutters the display," he muttered 2 days later, removing it and setting it face down on the kitchen counter. But Mom didn't argue. She just waited until the house was quiet, slipped the certificate into her nightstand drawer, and whispered to me before bedtime, "I'll keep it safe. One day we'll find a wall that's yours." It wasn't about the frame. It was the idea that I mattered, that my work mattered, even if the world around me didn't clap. As I sat in the car watching a girl twirl on the monkey bars with absolute freedom, I felt the weight of that forgotten girl pressing on my chest. She had been brave once. She had believed she could matter, even in the shadows. But somewhere along the way, life had taught her otherwise. I went to college far away. Chose Seattle for its tech scene and distance. Danielle stayed in Ohio, married a dentist, had 2 kids, and became a PTA president. Caleb bounced between jobs, charming and uncertain, always landing softly, thanks to family safety nets I never learned how to fall into. And me, I built something. I built teams, led projects, solved problems no one else wanted to touch. I worked weekends. Said yes to impossible tasks. Climbed ranks not by smiling at the right people but by outworking everyone in the room. And yet, every time I sent home a Christmas gift with my company logo on it, I heard, "That's nice, Gemma. So when are you coming home?" I wanted to scream. I am home. I made a life. But it never felt like enough. They saw my distance, not the doorways I built. They saw my absence, not the thousands of silent ways I tried to stay connected. But Mom, she always called. Even when the conversations grew awkward. Even when I had nothing new to say. Even when I was too tired to pick up, she left voicemails like small breadcrumbs, hoping I'd find my way back. And I thought I had. I thought this birthday would be the moment we'd bridge the gap. That I'd hand her the brooch and see her eyes light up, not from surprise, but recognition. That she'd know I still remembered. That I still cared. Instead, I was back to being the invisible girl at the edge of the photo. A middle child left out of the guest list. But maybe invisibility wasn't permanent. Maybe being cropped out just meant I needed to draw the frame myself. College was my first real escape. When I told my family I'd chosen a university in Seattle over 2,000 miles away from our Ohio suburb, my father's reaction was immediate and sharp. "What's wrong with the schools here?" he asked, as if my decision was a betrayal, not a beginning. Danielle stayed in state. Caleb at that time was still too young for the conversation to matter. But the implication was clear: I was choosing distance, and distance felt like disapproval. The day I left, Mom hugged me tighter than I expected. "Don't let them make you feel guilty for growing," she whispered into my hair. For the first year or two, she kept her promise. She called often. She asked questions, listened, laughed when I told her about my awkward roommate or how hard it was to find decent coffee on campus. She even sent me homemade cookies, once sealed in a box with pink tape, and her neat handwriting. But over time, the calls grew shorter, less frequent. Then came the shift I didn't see coming. After graduation, I stayed in Seattle. I took a job at a small but ambitious tech startup and worked my way up faster than I'd ever dared hope. I poured myself into every project, every deadline, treating success like a raft I couldn't afford to fall off. I still called home. Still sent postcards from conferences. Still mailed Christmas packages with gift cards and handwritten notes. But things changed. Slowly, subtly, the energy shifted. Brooke, who was in college by then, having chosen to stay closer to home, became the new gatekeeper of family information. Whenever I called Mom, it seemed Brooke had just updated her. "Oh, I already told her about that," Mom would say casually, or Brooke said, "You're swamped with work." I started feeling like an outsider peering into my own family through a window someone else had smudged. One Thanksgiving, I called to say I couldn't make the trip due to an urgent system rollout at work. "I understand," Mom said. But her voice was flat, not disappointed, just resigned. "You're always busy." I tried to explain that I was training a new team and managing client expectations across time zones. That I'd sent a basket of gourmet food for the dinner. That I was thinking of them. But the silence on the line told me none of that mattered. A few weeks later, Danielle posted a photo of the family dinner on Facebook. Everyone was gathered around the table. Even Caleb managed to show up laughing with a beer in hand. My chair was empty. It wasn't just absence, it was erasure. I started hearing little things, secondhand comments from relatives, mutual friends, old neighbors. She's the one who moved away, right? She's always working, never comes home. Brooke says she's kind of full of herself now. Each word was a brick. And Brooke. She never said these things directly. No, she was smarter than that. She said things like, "Mom misses you, you know. It's just. She doesn't really get your lifestyle. You don't call as much as you used to. I think she feels forgotten." I told them, "You're probably too busy with your company dinners and big city friends." I wanted to scream, "I'm not forgetting you. I'm trying. Trying to keep my head above water in a field that demanded 150%. Trying to prove that a woman from our zip code could make it without marrying into money. Trying to build something worth being proud of. But success has a strange cost when your roots are watching. To my family, it began to look like abandonment. I tried inviting them to visit. "Come see Seattle," I said. "Stay with me for a weekend." "Too far," Dad muttered. "Too cold," Mom added. Brooke said nothing. She didn't need to. Even my efforts became ammunition. The Christmas I sent personalized boxes, tech gadgets for Caleb, spa treatments for Mom, a monogrammed briefcase for Dad. They were politely acknowledged but never truly appreciated. "It's too much," Brooke said when I asked if Mom liked her gift. "You always go overboard." I wanted to ask, "Why does effort feel like offense to you?" But I already knew the answer. They didn't want the Gemma who built a team, signed contracts, mentored interns. They wanted the Gemma who stayed home. The one who played small. The one they could wrap up neatly as our middle child without needing to understand who she'd become. The Gemma I was becoming didn't fit inside their narrative. Worse, it began to feel like they'd rewritten it altogether. And the person holding the pen was Brooke. She was always close to Mom. Closer now than ever. She took her to appointments, helped around the house, showed up on holidays with casseroles and picture-perfect smiles. She was the daughter who stayed, and I was the sister who sent emails from time zones away. It would have been easier if Brooke were overtly cruel. But she wasn't. She was polite, controlled. Passive-aggressive in the way only family can master. She didn't push me out of the picture. She just made sure there was no room for me when it was framed. The result, even Mom's voice changed. She hesitated when I asked about her health. She paused before answering questions I used to know instinctively. I once mentioned my new apartment downtown, a place I'd worked hard for with a view of the bay and a tiny balcony where I sipped wine after long days. "That sounds expensive," Mom said. "It's not so bad," I replied. "Besides, I really love it." She was quiet, then asked, "Do you ever wish you'd stayed closer to home?" The question wasn't innocent. It was loaded with disappointment I hadn't earned, and still I tried. I sent more texts, more pictures, more thinking of you gifts, but it was like trying to build a bridge on a foundation someone else was quietly dismantling. Eventually, I stopped calling as often. Because the silence after I hung up lasted longer than the conversation itself. Because every effort felt like shouting into a well, hoping for more than just an echo. Because I got tired of proving that success didn't mean I had forgotten them. But that's the thing about distance. It doesn't just measure miles, it measures misunderstanding. And somewhere between Seattle's skyline and my childhood porch swing, I lost the version of me they still expected to show up. There's a strange kind of violence in being quiet too long. I used to think that silence meant strength. That by not fighting back, by not taking the bait, by not correcting every misinterpretation tossed my way like a passive-aggressive grenade, I was protecting the peace. But I've since learned that silence too tells a story. And sometimes it tells the wrong one. I had been playing the good daughter game for too long, sending thoughtful gifts, offering to fly people out, quietly swallowing disappointment like it was some sort of virtue. But that Thanksgiving I snapped. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a wine glass or storm out. But I said something. And in this family, saying something was its own kind of betrayal. It started innocently enough, like these things always do. The dinner table was long, crowded with people I hadn't seen in months. Uncles, cousins, neighbors, and, of course, Brooke perfectly composed at Mom's right hand. I had flown in on a red-eye, rearranged meetings, spent the night at a mid-range hotel because staying at the house felt like asking to be an afterthought. Still, I showed up. I wore the sweater Mom said she liked last year. I brought 3 bottles of wine. I helped set the table. I tried. The turkey was halfway carved when the topic shifted like it always did to me. "You're still at that tech place, right?" Dad asked, scooping mashed potatoes onto his plate. His tone was neutral bordering on dismissive. "It's called Vertex," I said. "We just opened a new regional hub in Singapore, actually." Brooke gave a small laugh. "Must be nice to have time for jet setting." I smiled tightly. "It's not vacation. I was there for a client pitch and board meetings." "Still sounds glamorous," she said. "Meanwhile, some of us are here helping Mom every week, not flying first class." That was the moment. The pivot point. Every Thanksgiving seemed to come with one. One subtle jab too many. One sharp comment no one else would challenge. And I used to let them go, let them slide, because starting a fight felt childish. Because I wanted to be the bigger person. Because I believed foolishly that if I didn't react, they'd stop. They never did. This time I put down my fork. "At least I built my life myself," I said. The room fell completely still. It wasn't what I planned to say. It wasn't even loud. But it was final. It was undeniable. And it was too much. Mom looked up, her mouth slightly open like she wasn't sure whether to scold me or comfort me. Dad's knife paused mid-slice. Brooke blinked, stunned for a moment, then sat back slowly in her chair. "You think we didn't build our lives?" she asked, voice brittle. "Is that what you think of us?" "I think I worked damn hard to get where I am," I said. "I think I sacrificed holidays and weekends and relationships, just to be told that none of it matters because I don't show up for Sunday potlucks." "You chose that path," Dad said, his voice cool. "Don't act like you didn't." "I chose it because I wanted more. Because I wanted something different. That doesn't mean I don't care." Mom tried to interject, but the tension had already sunk its claws in. "You've always thought you were better than us," Brooke whispered, as if saying it quietly made it less cruel. "No," I said firmly. "I've just always been expected to apologize for wanting you." That was the end of the conversation. And in many ways, the end of everything. No one said much for the rest of the meal. Someone changed the subject to Caleb's new bartending job. Someone else asked about the weather. But the mood had shifted like a curtain dropping. I helped clear the table afterward. Stacked plates, washed dishes. Said goodbye with hugs that felt like they'd been ironed flat. No one asked when I was flying back. No one said safe travels. And when I returned to Seattle, the silence that followed was louder than ever before. For weeks there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no voicemails from Mom. I reached out once, sent a message about a work award I'd received. No response. Sent another with a photo of a quilted throw I'd found that looked like the one Grandma used to have. Nothing. It was as if I'd been erased. At first I told myself it was just fallout. That they needed time to cool off. But months passed. Christmas came and went. I sent gifts. Heard nothing. I called Caleb. "Things have been weird," he admitted. "They're saying you were hostile." Hostile, I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "For saying I built my life myself. They didn't like the tone," he said awkwardly. "Brooke said you made Mom cry. She always cries when she doesn't get to control the narrative." He didn't respond to that. That's the thing about silence: when you don't explain yourself, others will explain you for you. And they will rarely do it kindly. By choosing quiet all those years, I'd given Brooke a blank page to fill in. And she did. She painted me as cold, distant, too busy for family. She never had to lie. She just told half-truths with perfect timing. And the one time I spoke up, they used it as proof that the narrative had always been right. It's a kind of grief, being misunderstood by the people who raised you. I wasn't trying to compete. I wasn't trying to make them feel small. I just wanted to be seen for what I built, for who I'd become, not through the lens of comparison, but truth. I didn't want applause. I just wanted honesty. But that Thanksgiving became my final audition. And in their eyes, I had failed the role of the gracious, grateful daughter who never made waves. I was no longer invited to play along. It started with a necklace. Or rather, the memory of one. When I was 10, Mom showed me her grandmother's jewelry box. Inside were pearls gone gray with time clip-on earrings from a different era and a vintage emerald brooch shaped like a leaf. It had a missing stone in the middle which made it somehow more beautiful to me, flawed and still worth keeping. That one was always my favorite, she whispered, touching it like something sacred. Years later, during one of our last phone calls that still felt like real conversations, I mentioned it. You remember that old brooch, she said, surprised. It went missing during the move after Dad retired. I always wondered what happened to it. I remembered. Not just the brooch, but the way she looked when she spoke of it, and that's how I knew what to get her for her 60th birthday. I didn't get an invitation. Of course, I didn't. But when I saw Brooke's event post on Facebook, a full-blown party with banners, relatives, catered food, and glittering string lights, I knew I had to go anyway. I'd called Mom a few days before. She sounded tired, distracted, like her thoughts were somewhere between my voice and whatever story Brooke was spinning. When I asked about the party, she stammered. I didn't think you'd be able to make it, she said. Brooke said you were tied up with work. I can come, I said, as clearly and softly as I could, if you want me there. She paused, then almost cautiously. Of course. It would be lovely to see you. It wasn't conviction. It was fear of rocking the boat, of contradicting the version of me they'd already agreed upon. Still, I took that lovely to see you and held it like a flame against the wind. I booked the ticket. First class, my own small rebellion against the belief that I had abandoned them just to live in luxury. I spent days looking for the perfect gift. Not expensive, not flashy, just meaningful. Eventually, in a little antique store tucked between a bookstore and a bakery in Capitol Hill, I found it, a vintage emerald brooch with a delicate gold clasp. Not identical, but close. Close enough that I could almost hear 10-year-old me say, "She'll love it." I paired it with a gift certificate for a spa retreat she'd mentioned once long ago when she thought no one was listening. The card I wrote was simple. You told me once that this was your favorite. I never forgot. Happy 60th, Mom. Love, Gemma. I practiced my lines in the mirror the night before. You look amazing. How's Aunt Jean? Things are going well at work, but I want to hear about you. I'm sorry for how things felt last Thanksgiving. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I did my makeup like armor. Wore the navy dress she always liked. Put on the pearls she'd sent me after college. I looked like the daughter she once believed in. And then I drove to the party. The venue was a renovated boathouse, overlooking Lake Monroe, elegant, tasteful, exactly her style. I saw Uncle Pete's Jeep, Aunt Renee's minivan, even Danielle's station wagon. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. I approached the entrance box and hand hope in check. And then I saw my father. He stood like a sentry, military, straight, clipboard in hand. His jaw clenched when he saw me. You're not on the list, he said, voice as flat as the stones beneath our feet. I spoke to Mom, I replied. She said. She was being polite, he interrupted. This event is for family. I blinked. I am family. Family who shows up, he said. Not just when it's convenient. Behind him, I saw Brooke in a pale pink dress wearing a pearl necklace eerily similar to mine. She looked like Mom's reflection, only curated. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch. Just smiled, controlled, distant. Final. And that's when I knew. Mom didn't know I'd come. They hadn't told her. The space between hope and realization is only a breath wide, but when it collapses, it can hollow out your chest. I stood there frozen in that breath. I just wanted to drop off a gift I managed. Dad took the box like it was something he'd agreed to accept under protest. I handed it over carefully, like maybe, just maybe, if he felt the weight of it, he'd understand what it cost to bring. Tell her I wish her a happy birthday, I said. Tell her, I remember. And then I turned. I didn't run, didn't argue, didn't beg for entry or explanations. I walked back to my car like I'd done it 100 times before, like retreat was my native language. I sat behind the wheel, hands shaking in my lap. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Mom Demand to know if she'd really believed I didn't want to be there. I wanted to text Brooke something scathing. I wanted to walk back and grab the microphone and say, "This is what exclusion looks like." But I didn't. Because that's not who I am. I am not the tantrum. I am not the scene. I am not the wrecker of parties. I am the girl who keeps showing up even when no one sets a place. So I stared ahead, and I breathed. In. 2. 3. 4. Out. 2. 3. 4. Somewhere inside that controlled breath was the girl who once danced in paper crowns with her mother on a forgotten birthday, who hung third-place certificates like gold, who believed that being loved wasn't something you had to earn over and over. I remembered her. And I decided for her and for me I wouldn't let this break me. I wouldn't fight them in the open, but I would keep walking. And maybe, just maybe, one day they'd wonder what was inside the box. The gift they never opened. I had barely stopped shaking when the knock came. 3 taps, light, unsure. I turned expecting maybe an aunt or a distant cousin trying to smooth things over. What I saw instead was Jesse Brooks' boyfriend standing outside my car window. He looked awkward. His tall frame bent slightly, hands shoved into his suit pockets. His tie was askew as if he'd just tugged at it for the 100th time. I hesitated before rolling down the window. "Hey," he said, voice gentle. "Gemma, right?" I blinked. "Yes." "Hi." He cleared his throat. "I know this is weird, and I wouldn't bother you if I didn't think, well, if I didn't think you deserved to know what's going on." He tilted my head. "Go on." He glanced back at the venue, then lowered his voice like we were conspiring. "Your mom didn't know you were coming." "I figured," I said. "No, I mean, she really didn't know. Brooke told her you declined the invitation. Said work had you flying somewhere overseas again." I felt my chest tighten. "That's a lie." "I know." There was a pause. The kind that's not empty but full of quiet realizations. "I'm Jesse Lawson," he added, extending a hand awkwardly through the open window. "I know who you are," I replied, not unkindly. He gave a crooked smile. "Right. Well, I also work at Vertex." I blinked. "You? What?" "Yeah," he said sheepishly. "I'm in software engineering. Transferred from the Chicago office about 8 months ago." I stared at him. "You work at Vertex?" I repeated the words, heavy with disbelief. He nodded. "3rd floor. I saw you in the cafeteria once and nearly dropped my coffee." "Oh my God," I muttered. He laughed nervously. "Yeah. Small world, right? But Brooke, she never mentioned. She knows I work there. But she doesn't know you're my boss." I froze. "You're on the org chart above me," he clarified. "Technically I don't report directly to you. But you're high enough that HR still had to run conflict of interest training when I got assigned to a cross-departmental task force." I blinked again. He looked at me carefully. "When I saw you outside just now, I recognized you instantly. But then I watched your dad turn you away. And Brooke just stood there. I realized they planned it. I finished for him." Jesse gave a slow nod. "At the rehearsal dinner last night, your dad and Brooke talked about what to do if you showed up. Your mom wasn't part of that conversation." I sat back, heart hammering. "They've been building this story," I said quietly. "That I don't care. That I chose ambition over family." Jesse hesitated. "They've been curating a version of you, yeah. But working at Vertex, that showed me something else entirely." I looked at him. "You don't know what people say about you there, do you?" "I try not to eavesdrop on my own reputation," I muttered. He smiled. "They talk about how you mentored junior staff. How you stood up for a woman in QA who was being ignored in meetings. How you personally renegotiated our vendor contract last quarter and saved us $1.3 million. I blinked. "That was a team effort." He shook his head. "Everyone knows who steered that ship." I let that sit for a moment. "At work," he said softly, "you're respected, like genuinely. People look up to you." My eyes burned. I turned away, blinking hard. "That's not something I hear very often." "I just thought you should know," he said. "Because what I saw at that door, that wasn't right." "No," I said. "It wasn't." I almost said something he confessed. But Brooke. Things are complicated. I understand. Still, he added, I followed you out here because silence sometimes speaks the wrong message. I looked at him, then really looked. He was younger than Brooke by a couple of years. Smart, kind, honest. And standing in front of me, not as my sister's boyfriend but as someone who had seen through the illusion and chosen truth anyway. You said something just by coming out here, I said. He smiled. Thanks. We stood like that for a while, the silence between us less painful now. I should head back, and he said at last. They'll notice I'm gone. I nodded. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm glad I work for you. That broke me a little. Thank you, I said, voice softer than I expected. He turned to go, then paused. Gemma, yes. When you're ready to be seen, really seen, I'll stand next to you. Then he walked away. And in that moment, I felt something shift. For the first time in a long time, someone had chosen my truth over their comfort. And it didn't come with noise or applause or confrontation. It came quietly, steady, like respect. Like a small, beautiful twist in a story long overdue for a rewrite. Gemma sat motionless in the rental car, her hands clenched in her lap. The brooch, carefully wrapped in tissue and ribbon, rested on the passenger seat like a forgotten offering to a god that no longer answered. Outside, the wind skimmed across Lake Michigan, the party inside alive with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. She had come for her mother's 60th birthday, flown across the country, prepared words, selected memories, and now she sat outside unwanted. The knock at the window made her flinch. She turned and met Jesse's eyes, awkward, apologetic, searching. She rolled the window down slowly. Yes. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry about earlier. About all of it. She waited. I should have said something when your dad stopped you. Or when Brooke said what she said. I didn't know how to react. Gemma studied him. And now Jesse looked back at the venue, then at her again. Now I know who you are. And I think it's time they do too. That sentence cracked something, not anger but clarity. Without another word, Gemma stepped out of the car. The spring breeze caught the hem of her navy blue dress, her heels clicked with purpose on the stone path. Jesse didn't speak again. He simply walked beside her. Inside, the room sparkled. Polished wood floors, lilac accents, strings of light twinkling above perfectly arranged tables. Guests leaned into conversations, clinking glasses filled with champagne, oblivious to the slow collision about to unfold. Then Jesse's voice rang out, not loud but firm, cutting cleanly through the soft murmur. Sorry to interrupt, he said. But I'd like you all to meet someone very important. This is Gemma Reynolds, Patricia's daughter. And also my boss at Vertex Technologies. Every head turned. The name hung in the air. Across the room, Patricia, Gemma's mother, rose from her seat. She looked like someone seeing a ghost. Gemma. Her voice cracked the way porcelain does, hairline but irreversible. Gemma stepped forward, heart pounding but chin lifted. Hi, Mom. Patricia blinked rapidly, her hands fluttering toward her necklace, like they might anchor her. I thought you weren't coming, Brooke said. She was wrong, Gemma said quietly. I told you I'd be here. Gemma turned to face the guests, now watching like witnesses at a trial. I wasn't invited in because I was told I didn't belong. But I do. She exhaled, the weight of years pressing against her ribs. You all know parts of me through holiday stories or Brooke's version of my life. But I want you to hear it from me. I didn't leave this family. I left a room where I wasn't allowed to speak. A hush fell. Forks froze midair. Even the slideshow paused on an old family photo. Brooke centered their little brother smiling. Gemma blurry in the background. She turned to her father, whose expression was stone. You told me this party was for people who make time for family. I have. You just didn't notice. Then she faced her sister. Brooke, I sent gifts. I called. I invited you all to Boston. But somehow I became the selfish one. The stranger. Brooke's voice was taut. Because you were never here when it mattered. I was here, Gemma replied. You just never looked. Patricia moved closer, her lavender dress shimmering under the lights. Gemma, she whispered again, and this time her voice held something different: grief. Regret. Gemma handed her the gift. The moment Patricia opened the box and saw the vintage emerald brooch, her eyes widened. Oh, she breathed. I haven't seen one like this since I was a girl. I remembered, Gemma said. You showed me a photo once. You said your grandmother wore one just like it. Patricia's hands trembled around the box. You remembered that after all these years. I remember everything, Gemma said. Even when you forget to call, even when I stopped being invited. A soft gasp rose from a guest in the back. Someone wiped their eyes. Gemma took a shaky breath. I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came because, despite everything, you're still my mother. The silence was no longer hostile, it was reverent. Then Patricia turned to the room, lifting her voice. I didn't know she was turned away. I never would have allowed that. Gemma is my daughter. And I am proud of her. The dam broke. Uncle Robert stepped forward. You've always had guts, kid. Someone else clapped, then another. Soon the room was echoing with quiet applause, not raucous, but real. Brooke stood rigid, her eyes burning. This is manipulation, she muttered. No, Gemma said gently. It's truth. Jessie stepped beside her, silent support embodied. Patricia lifted her champagne. To daughters who never stop trying to be seen. Gemma raised hers, her voice steady now. To mothers who remember. And sisters who someday might. The glasses clinked. As the applause died down, Patricia set the brooch down with reverence and turned toward her husband. Robert, she said, why did you do it? His eyes darted toward the floor. I thought I was protecting you. After Thanksgiving you were protecting your pride, she said, the gentleness gone. Not me. He looked away, jaw tightening but offering no defense. Brooke finally stepped forward, arms crossed, but her voice trembled. Do you know what it's like, Mom, being the one who stays, the one who handles everything when you forget your medication or Tyler's too drunk to show up? Patricia blinked. I didn't ask you to take that on. You didn't have to, Brooke snapped. You gave up after Gemma left. You tried, sure, but I was here picking up the slack. And what thanks do I get? You still keep her damn third-place science certificate in your drawer. That last confession cut the air like a knife. Gemma froze. You knew about that, Brooke laughed bitterly. Of course I did. I found it when I was changing Mom's sheets. I thought you were the forgotten one, but that drawer said otherwise. Patricia stepped between them now, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and conviction. Keeping that certificate didn't mean I loved Gemma more. It meant I knew she needed proof that someone saw her. And I did. Maybe not enough. Maybe not well. But I did. The room had gone silent again. No slideshow, no music. Just the hum of realness finally spoken aloud. This isn't about who suffered more, Gemma said softly. It's about the stories we told ourselves to survive being misunderstood. Jessie put a steadying hand on her shoulder, but she didn't falter. I can't undo the years, she added. But I can offer this: I won't be silent anymore, and I won't let anyone else write my part in this family. Patricia reached out and took both daughters' hands. Then maybe we start again. With truth. With boundaries. With actual listening. For a moment Brooke didn't move, but she didn't pull away either. Gemma looked around the room, eyes landing on familiar faces, some welcoming, some unsure. But for once, none of them looked through her. Later that night, when the cake had been cut and the music resumed, Gemma found herself standing near the balcony, the lake glittering like spilled diamonds. Her mother approached quietly. You brought light into this room tonight, Patricia said. Not just truth, but light. I wasn't sure I should. I'm glad you did. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Patricia whispered, would you mind if I visited Boston? Just me. To see your life. Gemma turned to her, stunned. I'd love that. And in that fragile invitation, something long broken shifted. The door that had once shut her out had begun to open, not because she demanded it, but because she dared to speak while her voice still trembled. The late evening light had softened the room. Most guests had left or drifted onto the patio where dessert trays and champagne lingered. Inside the venue, a hush returned, no longer heavy with silence, but with something else, the weight of truths finally acknowledged. Patricia gestured toward the smaller private room off the main hall. Can we talk? Just us. Her voice held no command, only a quiet invitation. Gemma nodded. Jesse gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze and stayed behind, understanding he was no longer needed here, at least not in this moment. Inside, the room was lit by a single floor lamp and the fading dusk from the window. The space was modest, a few chairs, a small table, nothing grand, just enough room to breathe. Patricia sat first. Then Gemma. Then Robert, stiff and wordless. Brooke paced near the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. For a long time no one spoke. Then Brooke broke. You know what hurts the most, she said, her voice catching in her throat. I stayed. I stayed here while you went off to your big life. And you got to be missed. You got to be remembered with nostalgia. I stayed and did everything and no one noticed. Gemma didn't interrupt. She let the words fall raw and unedited. I took Mom to appointments, Brooke continued, the flood now rising. I helped her with the house, I handled the bank stuff, I kept this family running when you weren't here. And yet when you show up it's like the sun came back. Patricia blinked, visibly stricken. I didn't ask for that, Brooke, Gemma said gently. I didn't know it was happening. You never told me. And would it have mattered, Brooke snapped. You just send another gift basket from your glass tower and think that counts. Gemma inhaled. Maybe I didn't understand what staying meant. I thought I was helping by succeeding. I thought being stable meant being useful. It meant being gone. Brooke said, sinking into a chair, the fight draining from her. The silence returned, thick with realization. Then Patricia spoke, her voice smaller than either daughter had heard before. I owe you both an apology. Both sisters turned to her. I thought I was being fair. I thought I was loving you both in the ways you needed. But I see now how much I missed. How much I let be distorted. She looked at Gemma. I should have questioned why your calls became fewer. I should have noticed when your voice sounded smaller. I didn't ask why. I just accepted the story that you were too busy. Then she turned to Brooke. And I should have told you how grateful I was. Not just for doing things but for holding so much without being asked. Brooke's chin trembled. Robert cleared his throat. I never meant to choose sides, he said. But maybe I did. You were here, Brooke. That made things easy. Familiar. He looked at Gemma for a long moment. You always felt like a question mark to me. Like you were writing a life we didn't understand. And, instead of learning, I retreated. Gemma nodded slowly, taking in each word like a scar she didn't know she carried. It's not too late, she whispered. To learn each other again. But only if we stop assuming and start asking. The silence hung like fog, thick, unmoving, unwilling to lift until someone dared to cut through it again. Robert spoke again, voice low. I remember when you were 12, Gemma. You won that science fair 3rd place. Your mother put that certificate on the fridge and I took it down. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I thought it looked messy next to Brooke's trophies. Gemma's eyes shimmered. You made me feel invisible. I think I did, he said simply. Patricia placed her hand gently over his. He flinched at first, then let it rest. Brooke, still seated, looked toward the wall as if it might offer escape. Her voice was quieter now. I used to think being the one who stayed made me stronger. But maybe I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. Gemma turned to her. And I left because I didn't know how to stay. Both women looked at each other, not with blame but with the fresh ache of recognition. I used to tell myself that your success made my life look small. Brooke admitted. But I realize now I was never mad at you. I was mad at how lonely I felt, and how no one saw it. Gemma nodded slowly. I thought leaving would make me free. But all it did was replace one kind of silence with another. For a moment all four sat in a circle that felt sacred, fragile, and honest. This wasn't a reckoning designed to solve everything. It was a reckoning meant to make space for the first time for what had been buried. Patricia broke the moment gently. I've been thinking of starting family therapy, she said. Not because we're broken, but because we've never really learned how to talk to each other. Brooke looked stunned. Robert raised an eyebrow. But Gemma, she smiled. That might be the bravest thing any of us have said tonight, she replied. Her mother laughed softly and exhaled more than amusement. Then maybe that's where we begin. Brooke looked down then up again. Can I come visit? Boston? Gemma's heart caught. She searched her sister's face for sarcasm. Found none. Only if I get to pick the brunch place, she said. Brooke smirked, eyes glistening. Deal. Patricia leaned back in her chair, tears drying into softness. I just want to know my daughters again. As women. Not roles, I imagined. And just like that, the room breathed. The silence transformed, not absence but space. Space for something new. Not perfect, not easy. But real. When they finally stepped back into the main room, few guests remained. The music had quieted. Dishes were cleared. But the night wasn't over, it had just begun in a different way. Gemma stood beside her mother at the cake table, one hand resting on the gift box still open with the brooch inside. It's beautiful, Patricia said again, her voice steady now. I wanted you to feel seen, Gemma replied. Patricia squeezed her hand. Now I do. The rain had just stopped when Gemma pulled into the arrivals lane at Seattle-Tacoma International. Her fingers tapped the steering wheel, not from impatience but anticipation. It had been 15 years since her mother had set foot in her city, the place Gemma had built her life stone by stubborn stone. She spotted Patricia before Patricia saw her. Her mother looked smaller than Gemma remembered, a little hunched, but her eyes were bright, searching. When she finally caught sight of her daughter, she waved like a schoolgirl. Gemma stepped out of the car, heart unexpectedly pounding. Welcome to Seattle, Mom. They hugged. Not a light, polite hug, but the kind where both lingered a little longer than expected, as if testing whether the old warmth was still somewhere underneath all the years. That weekend unfolded in layers. Gemma took her mother to the places she loved: the market with the flying fish, the hidden cafe in the alley where the barista always remembered her name, the library garden she snuck into for quiet moments between meetings. Patricia listened more than she spoke, eyes scanning her daughter's world like a traveler in a foreign land she wanted to understand. At Gemma's apartment, Patricia stood by the window that overlooked the sound and whispered, I had no idea. It's beautiful, Gemma. Not just the view. The life. Gemma didn't respond at first. She just stood beside her mother, watching the light dance on the water. Then she said, I used to wonder if you'd ever see it. I think I wasn't ready, Patricia replied. I was afraid that you were better without us. That was never true, Gemma said. The second evening, Gemma made roasted salmon with rosemary, one of her favorite recipes. They ate at the small dining table near the window, the city humming softly beyond the glass. Patricia complimented the meal, then fell quiet. You always cooked so independently, she said after a moment. I used to worry I hadn't taught you anything domestic. You taught me resilience, Gemma said, spearing a roasted carrot. The rest I Googled. That earned a chuckle from her mother, who looked suddenly shy. I used to think you didn't need us. The way you moved, the things you did, it made me feel left behind. Gemma set her fork down. But I needed you. I just didn't know how to say it without sounding needy. And I thought if I achieved enough, maybe you'd feel proud. Maybe you'd see me. I did, Patricia said softly. I just didn't always show it. And when I didn't understand your choices, I let that cloud my support. That was wrong. Gemma reached across the table and touched her mother's hand. We both missed each other in plain sight. That night, they sat on the couch with old albums Gemma hadn't opened in years. Some photos had edges worn from handling, others barely touched. They came across one of young Gemma at a science fair, beaming beside a cardboard solar system. Patricia touched it. Third place. I kept the certificate, you know. I know, Gemma said, eyes stinging. There was space now between them, not emotional distance, but a shared silence where forgiveness could begin to settle. Across town, Jesse sipped coffee and stared at his phone. Brooke's name hovered at the top of a message thread left unanswered. He typed a few words, deleted them, then finally sent, Gemma's mom visited this weekend. I think it helped them both. I hope therapy's helping you too. No reply came that night. But the next morning, Gemma received a text from Brooke. When you're ready to be a sister again, I'm ready to try too. No more middle woman stuff. Just us. Gemma stared at it for a long time. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she forwarded the message to her therapist with a single line. Am I ready to forgive someone who finally sees me? Later, she found herself walking the waterfront with Patricia again. They sat on a bench watching ferries glide across the bay. You know, Patricia said, when you were little you used to say you wanted to build something no one could take away from you. Gemma smiled. Guess I kept that promise. Yes, her mother replied, squeezing her hand. But I'm sorry you felt you had to. They sat until the sky turned lavender. And in that quiet, something unspoken passed between them, the kind of healing that didn't announce itself with grand gestures, but with the simple act of staying. The smell of roasted sage and butter filled Gemma's apartment, curling around the edges of the hallway and drifting beneath the door even before her guests arrived. The city outside buzzed with early winter trees, bare sky, the color of worn cotton, but inside warmth radiated from every corner. Candles flickered on the windowsill, quiet jazz floated from the speaker, and a table long enough to seat 6 stretched across the living room, made whole with the help of a rented leaf and mismatched chairs. It was the first Thanksgiving Gemma had ever hosted. At 9:10 a.m., her phone lit up. A text from Brooke. Hope dinner goes well, maybe next year. No emoji. Just 4 simple words. And yet Gemma felt something shift in her chest, a little release of air, as if she'd been holding her breath for a year. She typed back, there will always be a seat for you. By noon her mother arrived wearing the emerald brooch. You remembered my favorite pie, Patricia smiled, holding a dish covered in foil. And I remembered my favorite gift. They shared a long hug. No over-explaining, no rehearsed lines. Just 2 women meeting in the present, not the past. Robert came carrying a bottle of wine and looking visibly uncomfortable. But he complimented the table settings twice and asked how the oven worked. Small victories. Tyler arrived late with a new girlfriend who immediately complimented the curtains. He'd grown in subtle ways, Gemma noticed, less distracted, more present. Maybe seeing the family begin to repair itself made him believe he didn't have to stay in neutral forever. The food was imperfect, gravy too, salty rolls slightly burned, but the conversation flowed. They laughed about old movies. They argued over whether marshmallows belonged on sweet potatoes. No one mentioned Boston or Chicago. No one asked about past Thanksgivings. At some point between dessert and dishes, Patricia stood and raised her glass. I want to thank Gemma, she said, her voice steady. Not just for hosting, but for being brave enough to come back to the table. And for making one big enough for all of us. There was a pause. The kind of silence that doesn't come from awkwardness but reverence. Gemma felt her eyes blur. I used to think I had to earn a seat, she said softly. Now I know the seat was always mine. I just had to claim it as myself. After everyone had eaten their fill and the plates were stacked in messy towers on the kitchen counter, Gemma stood by the window, a mug of warm cider in her hand. Outside, the city lights blurred behind a thin veil of mist. Inside, her living room buzzed with the quiet aftermath of connection, people no longer strangers but family reshaped. Patricia was in the kitchen humming as she rinsed dishes, her sleeves rolled up just like she used to when Gemma was a child. Tyler's girlfriend had taken off her heels and tucked her feet beneath her on the couch, chatting with Robert about hiking trails near the Sound. And Tyler. He was dozing on the armchair, pie balanced precariously on his lap, an image so familiar and tender it made Gemma laugh. She turned back to the table. Only one chair was empty. The seat Gemma had placed between herself and her mother. She hadn't labeled it, hadn't said a word. But she had said it anyway, with silverware and a cloth napkin folded just so. A symbolic gesture. An invitation. Maybe next year. She thought of the years that chair had felt invisible the way she had once felt in her own family. And now it was there quietly waiting. Like hope, like change. Like the door had finally opened in both directions. Gemma walked over and sat in it. She touched the place card she had tucked under the plate, Brooke's name written in her mother's careful cursive. Patricia had insisted on writing it. She needs to know we still make room for her, her mother had said earlier that morning. Now, sitting in the seat that was meant for someone else, Gemma didn't feel empty. She felt ready. Ready for the version of her family that could be honest, messy, growing. Later that evening, after everyone had left, she lit one more candle and opened her laptop. A fresh document. A new title, The Table We Build Ourselves. It wasn't a memoir. Not yet. Maybe it would become one. Or maybe it would just be a series of thoughts she hadn't dared to voice until now. But as she typed, the first line came easily. Some families are born at the dinner table, others are reborn there. As the cursor blinked waiting for the next sentence, Gemma looked around her apartment warm, a little cluttered alive, and smiled. She didn't need a perfect ending. She had a beginning that was finally hers.